Hey everyone, this is Dr. Coach K coming to you live today for another Game Changers curriculum lesson and coaching session. We are on chapter 1 still. There's 4 chapters in the book, The Rich Get Richer and the Poor Get Prison by Dr. Raymond and Layton. We're on page 38 and we will continue to work through 3 books for a understanding and breakthrough of the systems of oppression. We're building systems of liberation, and we're hoping to build a new realm of prosperity, of ecosystems, green style lifestyle zones, and tranquility and serenity with the Micronation Universe movement. We are also working on building the Avatar Generation X powerful nation that believes and protects the power from within, which is the Holy Spirit, the Christ consciousness. And we are furthering our practice with healing sessions that will focus on alternative healing, naturopathic healing, and the opportunities of technology that will increase the opportunities to learn on a global scale instead of relying on biases and discrimination to give us accuracy. So our mathematics of accuracy will increase. So here we go. Let's start. Let's begin. So in chapter 1, we talk about the drugs and how that plays a role in the systems of oppression, and how the bias and discrimination of the justice system, the judicial system, the criminal justice system, and the law enforcement system have all been wrapped up into one discriminatory system that is a system of oppression that is tied to the past on the creators of the system, and the mission of the system and the vision of the system, and what the purpose was for the system. So the intent of the system. And so we've learned through some of these scholars their perspective and insight. And then I always add in my reflections and conversation. So we're going to start in the top of it. And we're going to start with the second paragraph. The second paragraph. Can we really believe that if guns were less readily available, violent criminals would simply switch to other weapons to commit the same number of crimes and do the same amount of damage? Is there a weapon other than the handgun though that works as quickly, that allows its user so safe a distance, or that makes the criminal's physical strength or speed or courage for that matter irrelevant? Could a bank a robber hold a row of tellers at bay with a switch of blade? Studies indicate that if gun users switched to the next deadliest weapon, the knife, and attempted the same number of crimes, we could still expect 2/3 fewer fatalities, because the fatality rate of the knife is roughly 1/3 of that of a gun. In other words, if guns were eliminated and the number of crimes held steadily, we would expect to save as many as 2 out of every 3 persons who are now the victims of firearm homicide. So this is to wrap up our last conversation about violence and gun violence, and then we're going to move into the conversation about drug issues. But before I do the switch, we're going to just finish the last reflection of what I would like to bring to the table about the gun violence. We know that the promises of Christ, it speaks about in our records of, archival records of artifacts, that the Christ consciousness, or the Christ action plan, is that guns is not going to become a human extinct. human extinction. Well, that is not the way the world ends, is through gun violence. But we do know that there will be a lot of victims in the road of destruction. We know that there's a lot of people that will be part of the road of destruction, meaning those victims that will be part of being preyed on. And then the road of life, which is very narrow and few, it will be very particular. People will have to live a certain lifestyle to avoid being casualties, or being at the wrong place at the wrong time, or being in the world where there's trouble. So it's going to be a hard race, or a hard future for our ancestors, which means those that died or get ascended based on the road of destruction, that they caught up as victims. They're not settling as victims because they get crowned of glory for the lifestyle, their intentions to live, and they just didn't have a choice. They were slaves to the road of destruction, because as you continue to use your studies, you'll see that the only way through life or into the kingdom of God is through his Holy Spirit, which is through the Christ. And so it's very narrow, the life that you will live to finish as someone that escapes corruption, escapes destruction, escapes being a victim, or escapes being in the line of being a prey. And so what we're trying to say is that regardless of what happens in I guess in the conversation of guns and gun violence, it's a mindset. It's not so that the weapons manifest due to the intentions and the mindsets of a culture, of a corporate culture. And this is what happens in commercialization. It's a manifestation of intent. Everything is based on imagination, and that imagination is based on intent. And so when it conceives and births as a manifestation, like guns and violence and such, it is a life cycle for that intent, that imagination, as you would a larva, or an egg or embryo that makes into conception. Then it has a life cycle. Some life cycles are longer than others, but there is a life cycle. And then the warfare that goes against that life cycle, and it's almost having a child, and someone causes war against that child. So we have these entities that we have birthed through being co-creators. So we have guns as a birth child, or a material child, and it has a life cycle. And so those that are non-violent are going to wage war against those that are violent, because the fact is they don't want to be preyed on. They don't want to be defenseless. They don't want to be powerless. And so you see this argument or debate on how do we control the violence, the guns, the perpetuation of that manifestation and imagination and intent, malicious intent. And so we have often to teach something different, or the mindset, or resolve something, whether it's through a child or through an adult. It's a reprogramming of the mind, renewal of the mind. And so we will not be able to delve into that conversation, but I'm always available to have these conversations for those that want to do this conversation and organize a party or a group session. I do not do one-on-ones anymore, but I do entertain group sessions or conferences or seminars where I can sit and have this conversation of my reflections. So we're going to now delve into the section about drugs in the systems of oppression and why the poor gets prison and the rich get richer. And this is my reflection, is that the rich get richer is because the system is created by the rich. The system is not created by the poor. See, when the system is created by an underdog, it develops into a different intent, a different imagination, different manifestation. Just like the conquests that were built based on violent people, people that was hungry and thirsty. Those were the ones that went through society just killing. They did not care about wealth. They did not care about the future or the life of God. They only cared about what? One thing, the conquest, taking territories. They didn't think about what happens after we take the territory and kill everything, right? It becomes ghost towns, right? It becomes a pit for the spirits. So these are the things that they had no knowledge of. They had no understanding of. They were just babies in the spirit. They had no recollect. They had no acknowledgement that God was alive and there was a whole new realm that they were digging themselves into. And now that they're ancestors, or now that they've missed the mark, we see their consequences, the results of their actions from that malicious intent and that imagination that produced that manifestation. But yet you still have people that want to challenge that theory and want to live in that manifesto, or live in that umbrella. And so we are now seeing different realities, or different formulas, mathematical formulas to these systems of their parents. Okay, so these are. Let's start with the drugs. Right, the United States has an enormous drug abuse and addiction problem. There is considerable evidence, however, that our attempts to cure it are worse than the disease itself. Most people associate drugs with crime because addicts steal, but addicts steal because the cost of drugs is high. This high cost is related to the drugs being illegal, because everyone in the distribution chain needs to profit enough to compensate for the risk of being caught and locked up. Much of the violence surrounding the drug trade is also related to drugs being illegal, because then the drug trade is in the hands of gangs and organized crime, and their disputes are not resolved through the free markets or the legal system. In response, the U.S. has engaged in a drug war that has cost billions, incarcerated millions, and is responsible for little change in drug use. Moreover, the criminalization of drugs undercuts public health efforts to deal with drug addiction. Paul Goldstein provides a useful categorization of the relationship between drugs and crime. This is pharma or pharmacological, psychological consequences. Criminal activity is caused by the chemical properties of the drug acting on the person's brain. Economic compulsive crimes. Criminal activities caused by drug users committing crimes to get money to support their habit. Systematic crime. Criminal activity like violence and corruption are a regular part of doing business in the illicit drug trade, because there is no regulation or informal dispute resolution mechanism are unavailable. About the pharmacological consequences of drugs, it says Alfred Blumstein, the drug that has the strongest pharmacological effect is alcohol. Heroin is a downer. So heroin doesn't do much, and there hasn't been shown to be much pharmacological effect of the other serious crimes, drugs on crime. Not anything comparable to that of the alcohol, which has been shown to be a strong stimulator of violence. PCP tends to be one of the only other drugs to have a pharmacological link to violence. High doses of cocaine and meth can lead to some psychosis that include paranoia and delusion, which can lead to violence. Further, many health effects are related less to pharmacology than to the criminalization of drugs. There is little evidence, for example, proving that heroin is a dangerous drug. James Q. Wilson, a defender of the prohibition of heroin and other drugs, admits that there are apparently no specific pathologies, serious illnesses, or psychological deterioration that are known to result from heroin use per se. Prior to 1914, when anyone could go into a drugstore and purchase heroin and other opiates, the way we buy aspirin today, hundreds of thousands of upstanding, law abiding citizens were hooked. But opiate addiction is not in itself a cause of crime. If anything, it is a pacifier. There is writes Arnold Trey Bach, nothing in the pharmacology of or physical or psychological impact of the drug that would propel a user to do crime. On the basis of available scientific evidence, there is every reason to suspect that we do our bodies more irreversible damage by smoking cigarettes and drinking liquor than by using heroin. Most of the physical damage associated with heroin use is probably attributable to the trauma of withdrawal and a product not so much of heroin as of its occasional unattainability. Health problems, including HIV, AIDS, and hepatitis, are partly related to the criminalization of drugs, which hinders public health efforts like the distribution of clean needles to addicts. THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, is a very safe drug, according to the science of marijuana. The 1988 Surgeon General report lists tobacco as a more dangerous drug than marijuana. According to the findings and conclusions of Francis Young, administrative law judge for the Drug Enforcement Administration, despite the 5,000-year long history of use and extraordinary high numbers of social smokers, there are simply no credible medical reports to suggest that consuming marijuana has caused a single death, and no amount of marijuana that a person could possibly eat or smoke would constitute a legal dose. By contrast, aspirin overdoses causes hundreds of deaths a year. A Police Foundation review in 2000 concluded that by any of the major criteria of harm, mortality, morbidity, toxicity, addictiveness, and relationship with crime, cannabis is less harmful than any of the other major illicit drugs or than alcohol or tobacco. Trey Bach points out that although federal authorities documented 2,177 deaths from the most popular illicit drugs in 1985, between 400,000 and 500,000 people died from alcohol and tobacco during the same year. A 2007 study of Florida autopsy tops. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. Florida deaths. They found that cocaine, heroin, and all meth caused 989 deaths, while legal opiates, strong painkillers, and brand name drugs like Vicodin and OxyContin caused 2,328. No deaths were attributed to marijuana. Doug Bandow, a senior advisor for President Reagan, okay, A Cato Institute fellow found that all illicit drugs combined accounted for about 5,000 deaths, most of which are caused by the effects of prohibition rather than the drug pharmacology. Okay, so we have to take a break from the reading. So this will saturate our mind, and then we'll get the supporting conversations, the supporting books for what the conversation is about. So, so drugs. So let's begin. the The reason why drugs was created. Let's do some research. Okay, we'll pull out Google, and we're just gonna look up the word who created drugs. Who created the first drug? Okay, and we're going to look at Google, and it says some of the world's oldest known drugs include opiates, which dated back to the 300s BCE, before Christ. The opium poppy was used for medical, recreational, and religious purposes as early as the 4th century BCE, when Hippocrates wrote about its analgesic properties. Other early drugs include hyoscyamus niger, discovered in the first millennium BC. This drug contains tropane accolades like thiamine, sorry, and SCO, scopolamine, SCOPOLAMINE. Glycerol, GLYCEROL, produced in 600 BC. Some Cimmerians also created clay tablets in the 3rd millennium BCE that contain detailed accounts of drug prescriptions, operations, and exorcisms. Okay, this, so drugs were created in the uh, ancestral before time, which is 80s after Christ, and then BC is before Christ. So it was done before Christ. So what happened when this was done? So what was the first drug? They say that some of the earliest known drugs used by humans include opium, cannabis, and alcohol. So let's put that down on a piece of paper and take your notes. Opium is one, cannabis is two, and alcohol is the third one. The top three. Top three. Okay. So these substances have been used for medicinal, recreational purposes for thousands of years. So we're going to put medicinal and recreational. Okay. So the reason why we're going back to the roots is to understand the tree. What was the first human drug? We're going to look again. People discovered opium poppies. So we're going to write that down. Opium poppies. You know, I did a report already on opium. So, but I always keep up current. So whenever I do my sessions, I don't use my old stuff. I go ahead and look on Google and do the research while we're doing these sessions, so you can see the process and learn to do it yourself. You know, teach to fish, reach one, teach one. In the Mediterranean, and cannabis and tea is in Asia. So cannabis, we have even locations, and tea in Asia. Okay. So we have the opium in the Mediterranean, cannabis in Asia. Archaeologists have found evidence of opium use in Europe about 5,700 BC. Cannabis seeds appear in archaeological digs at 8,100 BC in Asia, and the ancient Greek historian Herodotus reported getting high on weed in 450 BC. So right now we don't see anything in the Americas or the Africas. Okay, so let's look here. Mediterranean. Let's see. Mediterranean. Mediterranean location and culture. So we're looking at the Mediterranean as North Africa. The Mediterranean was considered as North Africa in the present day age, and South Europe, and the Middle East. Okay, so we are discontinuing that the Americas and the Southern Africans and mid Africans and the West Africans did not partake into these three drugs as a normal lifestyle. It wasn't part of their lifestyle. So let me see. Middle of the land, the region's location between the three continents has made it crossroads for trade and cultural diffusion for centuries. Okay, so it was introduced, but here's how the Mediterranean used it. The Mediterranean diet includes olive, vine, and wheat, as well as their derivatives like olive, wine, and bread. Okay, so a glass of wine. Let me see if it talks about the drugs in the opium and the cannabis. Okay, so they they are. Let's see here. No. Okay, so all three. I had only looked up what was the Mediterranean culture, so I did not include the conversation about the drugs. So let me try the first medication. Hippocrates is credited with being the man who invented medicine. He was a Greek physician who wrote the Hippocratic Corpus, a collection of 70 medical works. He is also credited with the invention of the Hippocratic Oath for physicians. Okay, so I'm going to take a picture of this so I can post it on along with the community. So this is where we do the origins. When we have a conversation, in no matter what scholar and what research, we do math. So I always put up my formula, 1 plus 1 equals 2, and 1 minus 1 equals 0. That is the formula I always use, okay? And then when I do this, then I can develop it. So what is the origins? That is 1, the origins, right? And then what is the development, which is the second one, okay? The second element, okay? And then what is the results? Okay? And that is the equal, when you add on to it or take it away. So with drugs, we are talking about Dr. Raymond and Leonton that created this conversation about how drugs is part of the factors of the system of oppression, how poor people get prison and then the rich people get richer. So my reflections to add in this conversation is, first we got to understand the system when it was made. Like when I went to college, I created a system. We were in business school, they teach you how to create systems, right? That's the first thing you do is create a system, because that's business. You got to have a system, and not just a product, not just a service. You got to commercialize it. So that usually means system to provide it for on a grander scale or for more people. Same thing with drugs. Same thing with criminal justice system. So you have a prison, right? In order for it to be profitable, it has to be on a scale, a commercial scale. How do you do a commercial scale? Like I said, you have to build a system. So this system was that rich people sat down in a circle, an elite, not the poor, not the sick, right? The rich that had the money to build the system. Okay, they created a system that said that for the rich, they get taxed or they get fees, right? But for the poor, so that could be a capitalization on it, they would be unable to defend themselves. Therefore, they would have to be the ones to carry, which be the product of the system, right? And when they become the product of the system, the rich would have kickbacks. and they would have the profit from the product. So that's the new 21st century slavery. Okay. Even if it was based on lawlessness, because if you could tell, there's two systems. The rich is lawless, and they get fine, right? They get a different type of system. Okay. And that is to pay their dues for lawlessness. So in reality, if the poor had to pay the same dues, they couldn't pay because they're poor, because we have a sliding scale. That is not the case in our society. So they get what they call a concentration camp, or a camp that is supervised. Okay? So what does this look like? It looks like slavery, right? Slavery has supervision. Slavery has dictatorship. And slavery has prevention of freedom. Okay? So now you have this system that now you can make profit from, because it costs money. Costs money. So you have Dr. Raymond and Lanton now saying, okay, here's the factors that feeds this system. This rich get richer and the poor gets poor. Prison. They have to have factors. What can now be considered lawlessness, so that it is easy for people to be put in prison, so that they could be a product, and then they become richer because they're profit off of the product, right? Just like slavery. So now you have to question yourself, what is the conditions to be put into slavery, into this prison? And we talked about gun violence, right? Now we talked about drugs. So we have, let me see if we talked about any other factors besides drugs, violence, which is guns. That's two. And right now, those are the major two. There's the crimes, as considered crimes. Okay? So we are going to develop that list. I'm going to let you guys develop that list, right? So now those are the two major, is drugs and violence. Okay? So these are the major factors that they feed into the people, so that they could be addictive, and when they become in that addiction, they become lawless. Okay, and what we learned, that lawless does not get you into prison. Poverty gets you into prison, right? Not wealth, because we see here the rich. There's a certain type of rich that gets you fees and fines, right? Okay, so what's the point of the prison? Let's go back to the roots. So the roots of drugs, you saw, was three reasons. It was medicinal, and it was for also recreational. Okay, let me see if there's a third one. I know I read the third reason. Did I write it down? The third reason was... Okay, so I didn't write down the third reason. But if you remember, you can tell me. But I only see two: medicinal and recreational. And then it came out of the Asian territories, right? Asian territories, and the European territories, and then the Middle Eastern, right? Now they're also claiming the North Africa regions, okay? And this is the second largest factor for crime, for what we call lawlessness, right? I don't want to use the word crime, but I have to remind people we are talking about uh, two ideologies: crime, as far as poor gets prison, and then lawlessness um, is for the system of the rich that gets richer. Okay, we're only talking about two systems. We're not talking about any other systems because there's rich that don't get richer, and then there's the poor that don't get prison. So we're only talking about two systems. The ones that get caught up in the system, which is the poor that gets prison. And that doesn't matter how much you make. It's a mindset where you use the money to pay for the habit. That's the poor that gets prison. The second one is the rich that get richer, and that is the people that created the system, that invest in the system, that as a stakeholder in the system, they get fines. So then they get profit. And so their money, though they put fines in, they get it back in the stocks, or they get it back in the investments, the return of investments. So that's what that means. Rich gets richer and the poor gets prison. So let's now get the spirit and the coaching, how to coach people to break the chains and how to build new systems, dismantle the old systems, and play your part as a team player in the game changers arena. Okay, so we're gonna touch base on the coaching method, and then we're gonna touch base on the spiritual method. Okay, so now we're in chapter. What chapter am I in? We're in chapter. I am so sorry. Let me get myself together. Okay, I have here. We are in what chapter are we? Chapter 4. Okay, so chapter 4, which is page 40. We are moving along. Now this book has how many chapters total? Total 12 chapters, and we're on chapter 4. Okay, so we are on page 40. So let me start. So the section we are focusing on, the the skill is the coaching relationship. Okay, and then it's the summary of the coaching relationship, and then we'll dig into the mutual trust. So let's begin. As you read this, you may discover why some of your coaching efforts have failed. Could it be that you and your client did not share a commitment, or that you hoped that your commitment and enthusiasm would somehow bring your client along? In my view, this is by James Flattery, Dr. Flattery. And he talks about, in his view, that let's see. I'm sorry. Could it be that, okay, so in my view, sometimes the commitment and enthusiasm of the coach do energize the coaching effort, especially in moments of uncertainty. But what makes such energizing possible is the already existent, although at the moment dormant, commitment of the client. So we're talking about the commitment of the client, okay? Let's remember that commitment of the client. That's dormant, okay? That is inactive, but it's there. Of course, some people may now ask, well, what do you do if this shared commitment isn't present? Does that mean coaching can't happen? My answer is yes. I do not mean that the coach is then powerless to take any action. What can occur is an inquiry into the client is committed to, and sometimes a bridge that can be that can be built from that to the commitment of the coach, therefore leading to something genuinely shared. In any case, that shared commitment is the background for the coaching relationship. The elements of the relationship are mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual freedom of expression. Let's discuss each in turn after some general comments. None of the elements in is independent of the others. What would it mean if we trusted someone who we didn't respect, for example, or if we felt free to express ourselves to someone who we didn't trust? Additionally, working on one element will strengthen the others. I'll address each element individually, so that you can have a way of understanding that the dynamics are in any particular relationship. The modifier mutual indicates that the quality must go both ways. So the client and coach trust each other, respect each other, and both feel free to express themselves. So let's take notes. So we're going to put down the three factors that will be applied to build new systems, right? We notice that this is a universal thing because we can tell the systems of oppression, the system of slavery, have done this with their own kin or their own family members or their own common ground, the people with mutual, allies, right? So what we're doing now is doing it for the system of liberation. We're building systems of liberation. So you become a game changer. So you have coaches that have to start with something, and that is what they call a relationship and the commitment of the client. And in that commitment client, you have the formula. You have three factors: one plus one plus one, right? The mutual trust, right? Then the second one is mutual respect. And the third one is mutual freedom of expression, right? You gotta be able to be freedom of expression, right? So today we're going to focus on the first factor, mutual trust. So I'm just going to read a little bit because, like I said, I can't get everything done in an hour, but I can work on some of these elements and then we continue it as we go through the sessions. Mutual trust. What do you mean when you say that you trust someone? How does trust come about? How is trust repaired? Do we have a say about whom we trust and whom we don't? Or is it just a matter of instinctive, unconscious selection? Your answers to these questions are more important than anything I'll have to say on the topic because it's always going to be your experience that informs your coaching. And although I know that readers rarely do it, I invite you to take some time to consider your answers to the questions above before you continue with the text. Okay, so all of us enter into the world of coaching with our own personal history. For some of us, that means that we have met many people we have found to be trustworthy. We discovered that we could take action from what they said, rely on their sincerity, and feel secure that they would maintain confidences. Of course, there are others of us who are on the other side of these examples. We have encountered people who we have found untrustworthy. We felt let down, betrayed, not supported, or lied to. Either set of experiences can leave us in either a strong position to coach or in or a fraught with difficulties. Since we can't change our background, the most important task becomes to understand where we are personally in our ability to authentically trust. A background full of trustful experiences may facilitate our trusting new people, but at the same time, a background of betrayed trust can leave us with an eagerness to leave the past behind us and find people worthy of our trust. The other side of the equation is equally symmetrical. People who have had many trustful experiences may miss the opportunities or sometimes subtle cues that alert us to a betrayal of trust about to happen. A background of trust can lead us blindly to certain circumstances. It is now see, this is where I want to jump in here to have a conversation. This scholar may not have their math as accurate as some scholars because I've read the action plan of Jesus Christ or Yahshua Christ, and he talked about the power of grace, power of mercy, and the power of compassion and power of forgiveness. He wasn't talking about ignoring or avoiding betrayal. He was addressing how to be in a position of power to be a game changer in these type of influences. He wasn't talking about pulling you out, but how to transcend it, how to interact with it, how to be interactive models, interactive systems that intercedes, that mediates, that coach, that advocates how to move through it and be successful, be victorious by healing people, healing damaged, broken, and disturbed people, or creation. How do we manage the power that can complicate truths and make truths complex? So this particular scholar, this is how you become a critical thinker when you read or do interact with artifacts or different scholars' work, is the math. How do you do the math, and how do you get the better accuracies? You have to pull these what I called covert and overt, hidden and unseen and unknown factors, and that will increase your accuracy. And that's how you become a critical thinker and glean through scholars and their work, because they have a lot of good work done, and you don't have to repeat their work, because you could just use their work, reference their work to do most of the heavy hitting, because it's like doing a mathematical problem. If half of the work is done, you can make sure that half is correct and accurate, and then adjust it, and then create the rest of the work, right? So you can finish the math. And so this is my kind of reflection, is that he only talks about two types of mutual trust, untrustworthy and trustworthy people. But in reality, there's a continuum and spectrum of trust. You have the believers, and then you have the unbelievers. That's another realm of trust, where it comes with different roots and different rooting system, right? Different parents, different malicious intents, and not malicious intents. There's so many levels of trust and untrustworthiness that can fall on both sides of the fence. You can have an untrustworthy person that could be the most trusting person if the root of the matter is resolved. Maybe something that happened in a childhood trauma, something that was external and not internal, that can be fixed. And sometimes what was internal would be generational, that can be broken. Chains that can be broken. And then you have trustworthy people that can be very untrustworthy, because they have permanent damage, things that cannot be fixed in this lifetime, that will be something they always work on, always monitoring, always observing, always checkpoints, always access points to their consciousness of right and wrong, because they're always tempted. They're always in a fork in the road to be trustworthy, because they have something that they're injured permanently. There's something that doesn't click, whether it's chemical imbalances, whether it's brain injuries, permanent paralysis, or where you paralyze permanently, unless it's being corrected by a divine appointment, a divine mercy, or divine compassion, which we call a miracle, or divine intervention, which is called the Holy Spirit healing. So these are the things that is added into this formula. How would I know that? From years and years and years of cross referencing, cross checking, cross training of different scholars from different industries and disciplines, that would compile a compilation and collect a collection of spirit, and of diversifying my portfolio of learning. So that's how you become a critical thinker. But why do I still read, different books? Because they were game changers in their generation. And to add their references into your formula, your mathematical, it makes it stronger, because now you have witnesses. Now you have what I call checkpoints, evidence based. So now you don't have to have a belief system. You have a scientific methodology, or a process into that evidence based theory or theoretical framework. And so this is what we're building when we're talking about systems of oppression, systems of slavery, that is built from thousands of years, if not 100,000 of years. BC, we don't even have the beginning origins of those dates. So we know it was before Christ. So it's been a very long time, when we can calculate after Christ as being, what, almost 3,000 years old, right? So anything before Christ is unknown. That means thousands, more than 3,000 years, right? And so, if we are acknowledging that these systems that we today currently are wrestling with, it's older than 3,000 years old, then we know the adaptation system, which is the correction system, the perfection to perfect these systems are real. Okay, they dig deep, real deep. And to escape from these systems or to overcome these systems, it takes a lot of wisdom, divine intervention, as well as discipline with great technique or great, excellent evidence based, formulas, right? Like mathematics. So, with that said, how do we set our family free? How do we protect our family for the future from these systems? And we see this in our fictional stories of like Wakanda. You have to build new systems, you have to build new worlds that is stronger, is better, is upgrade, to the old one. And hopefully the old ones will pass away. And sometimes they don't pass away. Sometimes they become a permanent universal truth of the opposite, of what we call good and evil, right or wrong, inaccurate or accurate, right, dark and light. So it is depends on what permanency life cycle these things are birthed from, conceived from imagination, and then from intention, right? The complexity of it, and then the mystery of it. So the mysticism of it as well. We don't want to ever leave out the spiritualism of it. Okay, so now we gather from the coaching, which we use that as our superpower, right? Is to coach people. Some people teach people. Some people preach to people. There's a lot of superpowers going on, which call skills or mastering your craft. There's singers, the worshipers. So we can go on. There's like, thousands and millions of talents and skills that can be a part of this process, but we're just going to focus on coaching, right? So here you are as a coach using this as part of your healing practice and becoming a healing practitioner. You're using coaching as a method to build, to heal, and to what do you call it, cleanse or correct. And when we look at this technique, mutual trust with your client, you understand that the client has to come with their own toolbox, their own commitment, their own intentions, their own imaginations for this to work. It can't be, a doorknob. You can't work with something that is dead inside, that doesn't have a canvas at all. I mean, even a clear canvas is something to work with, but no canvas at all. Now, how do you examine that, assess that, and to know that without deception is a hard task. But that's where you start with the evaluation of your client and vet them, the vetting process, right? Before you bring them into the acclimation process. So, this is what that conversation is. And in order for it to be game changers, you need a game changer nation to come to make a decision to do one or the other. Is to dismantle the other, which is to make sure that system of slavery is not a threat, or to build a system of liberation that is so powerful it swallows up everything. So I'm on that level. You just swallow up everything. You don't have to battle it because it's a threat, because you're always battling it. When you think of your cut, you don't sit there and just put a band-aid on it so you can always be trying to wipe it and syringe it, right, to clean it. No, you have to get to the core of it. What is it that you're eating? What is it that you're doing to interact with that cut? That is the core, the bottom line. And then, because of you eating healthy, like avocados, whatever, it heals correctly. And so when you clean it, it is permanently done. That's called swallow up. That's not battling with it, right? So you got to get to the root of the matter. So let's get to the spiritualism side of it, right? Cindy Trim, Dr. Cindy Trim, wrote a book called The Prosperous Soul. Like I've done the other books. Let me see how many chapters total in this book. There's 15 No, I'm sorry. Whew. There's 15 chapters. She was even nice enough to do a 40-day fast at the end. So I would like to develop that eventually. But there's total 15 chapters. Let me see. How did she organize this book? This is my first time, I guess, actually looking at it. There's 270 pages, but she doesn't talk about the chapters. I'm assuming there's 8 chapters. Okay, so let's go with 8 chapters because I am thinking she's focused on 8 chapters. Okay, so one book is 12 chapters, one book is 4 chapters. And we are on, what chapter are we on? We are on chapter 3. So we got 5 more to go. Okay, and we're on page 53, and we're focusing on the prosperity point. So each chapter has sections, and so you deal with defining the problem, and then you have your technique, and then you have where you become prosperity, the prosperity point, when you start doing the turning point, where you're not no longer working on your solution, you are the solution, and you're establishing the solution. So we're on the prosperity point in the prosperous soul, and we're going to start. Let me see, what was the problem, or the point is riches, true riches. So we're talking about rich, being influential. Okay, so here we go. The truly rich are those who have fully lived out their God given purpose, changing the lives of the people around them for the better. True wealth is the relationships we make, the people we influence to become all God has called them to be, and knowing we have everything we need to become all He has called us to be. So she's saying, let's take notes, the true wealth. So, because that's what we're in, that chapter, wealth, is relationships. That is the currency, is relationships. So let's go back to the beginning, and we're going to look at chapter 3, true riches. So what we did in chapter 2 is called a problem of the paradigms, and chapter 1 was the heart of the matter. So chapter 3 is talking about true wealth, okay, riches, okay, rags to riches. The true currency is relationships, okay. So write that down, currency. Okay, so we have 2 currencies, relationships and money, okay, or resources, okay, and the higher of the 2 is relationships, okay. So now let's go to, let me see, where am I? Worldly wealth is a tool to that end, provision to fulfill purpose. It means using the 3 things we have to invest, okay. Let me take this off so I can turn the page. Okay, this is what we have to invest: our time, our talents, and our treasure. So let's write that down. Time, talents, and treasure. So let's see what treasure is, because it doesn't say. To their fullest in the work of expanding the kingdom of God. Prosperity thought. There needs not a great soul to make a hero. There needs a God created soul which will be true to its origin, that will be a great soul. Thomas Carlyle. Now, we didn't talk about the treasure, but we didn't talk about the time or the talents. So let me see if I back up a little bit and see if she talked about it. No. So I would like to build on that for a reflection as coaching. Okay. So this section, I agree that the highest, currency is relationships, right? And I would like to argue building the relationship with God is the highest currency. And His kingdom, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and His righteousness, and everything else shall be added unto you. That's the highest currency, is your relationship to God. What you do with your time between you and God, when He speaks to your heart as a Heavenly Father, that is the wisdom that's imparted to you. That's the knowledge of God that's imparted to you. Some people call it epiphany. Some people call it revelation. Some people call the answers to mysteries. but it changes your soul. I mean, literally, genetically, it's like having a divinity bloodline that comes in and blends into your soul. You become one. So we're not gonna do a new chapter because I'm going to develop this chapter as an author. She did an excellent job. I give her that because I do agree relationships are important and the major currency. Because what do you do when you interact with people? Some people sell. Okay, let me catch this call after I'm done with this conversation. But selling is not a life cycle that is infinity. Building a relationship is not selling. Okay, when you sell someone, you're trying to, like people call manipulate, trying to skillfully get them to buy into what you're interested in. Whereas building a relationship is building an alliance. That means you find the common ground. That's not selling, finding the common ground, because there's a win-win. Usually in selling, there's a win-lose. You buy something that you're really not interested in, and then it doesn't do you any good. It doesn't help you. Like I did a coach. I paid a coach, and I paid that coach almost $1,000 for 30 days, and the promises was void, and I did not get a win in 30 days. I'm not saying it didn't happen for a lot of people, but for me, that $1,000, I was out. It was a loss. And so why would I spend another $1,000 the second month if there was no incremental growth that I could tangibly capitalize, which is called return of investment or a profit. It'd be different if I was in a meeting and I landed it and I got 5,000, then that would be 1,000 investment for the coach for the second month, and then 1,000 to replace the 1,000 that I put into that coach, and then I was in profit of 3,000. That is what I call win-win. That is not a sell. That is building a relationship. So let's go and work on the time element, the talents element, and then the treasure. The time is when you put into use your knowledge, your reflections, which is your meditation, which is your prayers, which is your fastings, anything that you invest in your time. That is where it's cost effective, sometimes free. Your time is very priceless. So when you use it, you are putting currency in it. The talent, where people says, I am working on my craft, that means mastery, repetition, skillful from the basics, right? And the third is the treasure. That is the X factor. What does she mean by treasure? When Christ talked about, the rich man giving all his wealth away, the true treasure, which is perfection, was to follow him. He became their sensei, he became their master. So, with that said, what is your treasure? And that's why it says you can't worship what? Money and God. What is your treasure? Money or God? Just like Jesus Christ said, sell everything. That's how you know what is your treasure. Because then if you follow Christ, that is your sensei. That you only could have master. It's going to be the master of you, the master of your treasure, and master of your world. So it might as well be the master of God, or master of good, the master of love, the master of everything. And that's the relationship with your creator. Once again, this is Dr. Coach K, live doing the Game Changers curriculum championship. May you have a victory in your life, in your world, in your relationships, and in your management, which is the way you organize and move in society. Okay, one love, much love, all love, peace and blessings. Thank you.